Hey fellow expeditionists, we're in Indiana Dunes National Park and we're going to hike the Cowles Bog Trail.
So we've hiked the Cowles Bog Trail in the past in warmer weather, and typically this is one of the most ecologically diverse hikes here in the Indiana Dunes. But we thought we would come out here and see what it's like in a whole different season. Indiana Dunes became part of the National Park Service in 1966 as a national lakeshore, but the Cowles Bog Trail was recognized as a National Natural Landmark a full year earlier in 1965. It is a 4,000-year-old wetland complex named after Dr. Henry Cowles, who did pioneering ecology work here in the early 1900s in the many bogs, marsh, wetland meadows, swamp, and pond habitats. It was his efforts that eventually led to the preservation of these dunes. The one thing about the Indiana Dunes National Park that I think really kind of ruins some people's experience as far as the national park experience goes is the fact that it's really kind of separated because there's a lot of communities right in the middle of the park, and there are a lot of industrialization, and that is of course because when they should have protected these lands back in the early 20th century, they kind of got sidetracked because of like the First World War and such, and as a result during that time industry built up during the early portion of the 20th century with steel mills, power plants, and all that kind of thing. And so now you come out here to hike something like this trail that is so unique, but you never get away from the sounds of industrialization. You've got train sounds, you've got the factory sounds, sometimes you get the smell from the factory and the power stations, but it's still nature, isn't it, Catfish?
Yeah, it's like a natural area that's still industrialized.
Yep. We're now kind of moving up the first of the major hills. This is where the dune succession really begins. So in the spring and summertime, these wetland ponds like this would be just absolutely full of geese and ducks. Not much this time of year, but those are some really big beaver mounds right there. All of these hills we're surrounded by are technically sand dunes. And with the dune succession, just kind of think of it as like ripples left behind by large waves. Each wave of sand dunes represents another succession of the dunes.
The dunes keep getting taller and taller as we get closer to Lake Michigan. About 3 weeks ago, we were on the white sand coasts of the Florida beaches, and now we're on the sands of the Lake Michigan beach.
Well, Catfish, you want to jump in and test the waters?
Sure.
Psych. Well, the beaches there on Lake Michigan are always unique and interesting, but now it's time to head on up the trail, which means back up the sand dunes. The sand is really kind of a damp, mixed in with leaves and such. So even though I'm huffing and puffing going uphill, it's actually a lot easier than if this was loose sand. So there's something I didn't really expect to see. Catfish and I were looking down here at the frozen pond and noticed the base of this tree looks a whole lot like a bald cypress tree, which we just hiked through down in Florida a few weeks ago. And you can literally see the cypress knees coming out of the ground right there. So I was unaware that there were cypress trees all the way up here in Indiana Dunes. Now, Catfish, weren't you just telling me earlier that you had just looked up information about the bald cypress?
Yeah, according to Wikipedia, what causes the northern limit isn't the temperature tolerance of the adult trees, but apparently if it's too cold, the seeds won't germinate.
So it's not that unusual that they could be found this far north.
Yeah, people cultivated them.
If they were to cultivate, but it's just kind of hard for them to germinate, huh?
Yeah.
Interesting. So that is the Cowles Bog hike here in Indiana Dunes National Park. We always loved this trail, but I will have to say, even though we made it a goal of ours to experience these kind of trails in all different seasons, and it's really cool to see it in the winter, it lost a little bit of its charm here this time of the year.
Yeah, it would probably be best to come here in the spring or summer when like the water's fallen, bird life has returned, and wetlands plant life is thriving.
Yeah, with all the ecological diversity that it has here at this park, you just don't really get to see it this time of year. But it's still a really interesting hike, wasn't it?
It was.
And it's just always neat seeing Lake Michigan and all of the surrounding dunes. Well, we're moving on to our next adventure, so till next time,
Peace out.